Thank you everybody for coming to the first of the Keep It Going discussions that we're having this year for storm.sg. We are going to be doing a lot more of these in the course of the year. This one is just an intimate discussion among people from different industries and is focused on the budget that was announced about a week or so ago, in which they are now arguing today and for the next few days.
In Parliament.
In Parliament, yes. But I thought it would be good to just take a look at issues within the budget that we feel may or may not have benefited us in terms of business, in terms of our personal lives, in terms of society, community, and in the larger context of how we are connecting with the world and how Singapore is going to be positioned. I'm sure there are many aspects to the budget which we can talk about, but perhaps if we could start with a brief introduction all around of each one of you, what you do, what you represent, and after that we maybe get into the first point of order, which would be what is your general perspective on the budget? Yeah. So let me start with I'll start on the right. Waldi.
I thought you were a left winger.
I will do things differently at times. Just from guessing.
Just to confuse people.
Keep them guessing.
I am PN Balji. The industry I represent is old age, because that's my obsession now. Growing old, and the phrase that I use is growing old gracefully, and the operative word is gracefully. But my career has been in journalism. I've been a journalist for nearly 40 years, and now I'm retired and now trying to write my book.
Casey?
My name is Casey Lau. I'm a practicing chartered accountant, public accountant, as well as chartered tax advisor. I've been in practice for close to 40 years. Specializing in taxation and financial consultancy and so on.
And you've written some books too.
Oh yeah, I've written a book on tax planning Singapore. It is into 6th edition. And it's just an intellectual satisfaction to myself. Thank you.
My name is Richard Hoon. I run executive search practice called iSearch Worldwide. I've been around for probably about a quarter of a century. And we only do at C-suite level. So top executive, we identify them for cooperation. And at this stage in my life, so giving back is important. So I have a charity called the Center for Fathering and Dads for Life. And that is a charity to help fathers to be better fathers. And this charity has been around for 18 years. And the Speaker of Parliament, the new Speaker of Parliament, Tan Chuan Jin, is our patron. We've been doing it for a long time. And lately, because of the change in trend around the world, I co-founded a fintech company called Validus. So that gives me a new lease of life and looking for a different perspective.
Super. Yeah, my name is Clive Chu. I'm from NTU, so I'm not sure whether I can say that I represent the education sector, but I can tell maybe from that perspective. I teach strategy in the business school. Actually, I worked in the corporate before for 18 years before I joined, so I'm not a full academic kind of person per se, right? So in fact, I did my PhD very late. I did my PhD when I was about 50 years old. So I just completed my PhD not too long ago. So it is, you can see that it's somebody that personified lifelong learning, you know. Yeah, I think I like sports a lot. So I sat on the NTU Sports Council before as well. Yeah, so that's about it. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Swee Yong. I'm a property agent. So during today's conversation, I will be talking about real estate. But more and more, I'm also, well, all of us are growing old. So I'm also looking out for things that are about old age. And old age is one thing, thinking about our children then is the next. As we age, then what do we leave for them? So I'm a jack of all trades, have been in all lines of businesses. So but today I'll focus on real estate.
I'm Chinka. I'm of Bright Editions. Strategies to investment to even lifelong learning, aging. So I'm very privileged to have met many industry leaders from all walks of life, and learning from them different domains. So I really hope that we could publish a lot more books written by Asians and especially Singaporeans.
Good afternoon. My name is P. J. Ratnam, and I'm an entrepreneur and a venture capitalist. I've been in many industries, from the press to the motor industry, and for my sins also the largest player in the mooncake business. So from traditional to current. And my interest in current affairs has been long-standing from the time I was a student, and I've always been interested. And as a Singaporean, I think we should take a greater interest and say in what becomes national policy, and that's probably why I'm taking part. I sit in a number of boards, and many of them are of a charitable nature, and that's my contribution to society as one gets older, and I share the interest with many of the others as a senior citizen myself. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sam Kwek Ling Chuang, and I run a company called Environmental Solutions. Been doing this for about 18-19 years now. It's a company based on sustainability, and we express ourselves in two ways. The first is by recycling base and precious metals. And recently, in the last 1 year or so, we decided to express another side of sustainability in selling electricity. So the way we sell electricity is we're using that as a force for good, because electricity allows us to have a conversation, a legitimate conversation with every home, and we want to use that opportunity to use electricity as a force for good. We have a social mission attached to what we're trying to do with electricity. I will stop there and hand the mic over back to Kanan.
Cool. Thanks. So now we know each other. So let's just get into the discussion. So the first thing I suppose I want to find out from all of your individual perspectives on what did you think of the budget, the last budget that Mr. Institute kept presented in Parliament?
Can I start?
Please do.
Because if I don't start, then I won't have anything else to say. If I finish, I'll choke first. Typical Singaporean. Okay, I have been trained very badly in journalism to think headlines. Right? So my headline for this budget is, it's a catch-up budget. This budget is playing catch-up. Why do I say that? I say that because the way the budget was presented, the expenditure, especially the expenditure, I leave aside the revenue stream, but the way the expenditure, I think this is the first time I've seen in recent times, the expenditure is huge, and a lot of the expenditure is going into infrastructure, which is if things had worked out fine, if things had been planned well, the infrastructure spending could have been spaced out. And I give you a couple of examples. I think one of them is MRT. I think we know by now that the kind of spending that we are now doing for MRT could have been done earlier, at least some of it, or major part of it. And then hospital. We have a hospital crunch problem. Maybe we didn't anticipate the kind of problems that old age was causing, and foreign labor was causing. Foreigners were coming here, and then we started on this building binge for hospitals. Jurong Hospital, at one time, was shelved, and then now suddenly they have to build the Zurong Hospital. So I think that's why I call it playing catch up. The budget that is playing catch up. KC is dying to.
You sure it's not catch up as in adding stuff to a meal?
No. I don't have
adding flavor.
No. I
Not
don't have that kind of. I don't have that kind of flavor. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
KC.
Okay. Generally speaking, the budget is not a painful budget, especially to the SMEs. I think the SME is the biggest winner in this budget. The tax rebates has been increased to 40% of the tax payable. So to the individual, the increase in personal tax rate has already been announced 1-2 years ago. So very little mention for individual taxation apart from the donation of 250% deduction still applicable for the next few years. The other good point is the deferral of the GST, which is actually quite unexpected. Everybody has expected the GST hike to be immediate. But again, it's good news. The GST is not going to be implemented until a few years later. The stamp duty is a little bit unexpected because of the increase in 1% stamp duty in excess of property value in excess of 1 million.
Residential property.
Residential properties. This is actually not good for the Singaporeans because the cost of ownership of a property is already very high. An additional 1% is going to add to the young purchasers. The ABSD, the additional buyer stamp duties, is actually not good for the Singaporeans, I would say. Many people would take properties as a form of investment, as a form of retirement asset. And this ABSD of 7%, 10% or 15% is a deterrence to accumulating retirement asset, which I think works against the interests of the Singaporeans. So in general, I think the budget is painless. Quite good budget, I would say. Thank you.
I see it's slightly different from KC. I think the budget is not innovative enough. Given that we have a stellar team of government that should have the foresight to see a lot longer, it's not innovative. The deferring of GST is something that I find quite strange. It seems to please for the short term that we don't have a GST immediately, but it does give them a lot of maneuverability in terms of where the climate will be in the next 2 years, 3 years. We don't know. So is it necessary? Is GST the only vehicle left? I found it quite intriguing. The government spent months deliberating how to increase tax instead of how to manage our cost. And you know, in any company, you sell a product, you never say, oh, how can I increase my price, you know, and still maintain competitiveness. You think of how to look at ways to be more efficient. So we want ourselves to be more efficient, but we have nothing to show how the efficiency is. Nothing about relooking at our cost of government in totality. It's not just the cabinet. Because it cuts across. Our civil servant is expensive. But we don't look at that. And so I think we're going to be straddled with this mindset that cost is an assume that in Singapore it will increase.
Is that a sacred cow mentality, is it?
I think that's why I say it's not innovative. We don't look at that. We don't see ourselves in a global perspective. We just look at ourselves in Singapore. And therefore things are expensive, so it has to be that way. So the only way is increase tax. So I found it to be that this current budget. I expect a lot more from the finance minister, who is touted to be the next potential leader of the country.
One off, yeah. Okay.
Okay. I think quite a number of people have already commented on the budget and say that it's quite a balanced budget. So I do not disagree. In fact, I think we expect it to be that there will be a short-term address lower or the mid-level. We'll have a hard time going up. So this is a very good idea, but I'm not sure how it's going to pan out. I think the other thing is I was just thinking about this budget, could it lack something about marketing Singapore as a brand? I have seen how Korean brands have actually penetrated into Singapore. You can see some of these things, and if you look at it, is that Gangnam thing, is that the Korean shows, it's it has permeated actually so much into our life that we accept it. And when these guys come to set up something, it's something that to do with Korean, so to speak, they are pretty successful, But actually they sell quite similar things, chicken or whatever not, right? Salon. Yeah, they're quite normal stuff. So I'm just thinking that when the budget talk about internationalization, and that's the way to do in that sense, for the economy, then how are we going to market the brand? Have they failed in marketing the brand, or is there something that we have to do to market Singapore as a brand? Because interestingly, when I talked to one Korean entrepreneur here, he told me that he started here because very successful. He used Singapore as the base, as the brand to get into Malaysia and so on. That's very interesting. So there's something I think about Singapore brand. I think the part on R&D as well, I think it was mentioned as 1% that you want to put into the R&D, but it was not very clear about where is it going to. There seemed not to be anything has to do with what PM said also about diabetes. I thought it will happen, like something like that will be mentioned, but it did not. Lifelong learning as well. I'm just curious, what is this lifelong learning about? Because I also heard from friends that they say that going through a course cannot make me a app programmer, So what do we have to do to change people's skill set to be able to, the aging ones to be more employable, for example? I think other things will be like, I think there's this thing about reaping synergies across industries. I mean, I understand what this thing is about, but how is it going to be done? I think absolutely that's the thing. What is Uber? Uber is a logistic company, or is what kind of company is it? Is it cut cross industry? And you see that is a norm these days, right? FinTech as well, and companies and industries cannot be seen in isolation anymore. But how do we actually realize this? I thought maybe a follow-up to the budget would be how actually these things can be implemented.
I'm sure that will come in the course of time, right? As the various ministries start kicking in and putting the plans into action. Okay.
Thank you.
Leon?
I have 2 points to make, but I also have points to make about your points. So first thing is stamp duty increase, the 1% that is above $1 million for residential properties only. It doesn't affect 80% of the people because most of the voters and the HDB sellers are at the below 1%, below $1 million mark. If you take yourself up another 10,000 feet, then look down. Over the past 10 years, stamp duty, additional stamp duty, seller stamp duty, and stamp duty on corporates, stamp duty on non-individuals, entities, ownership, plus now stamp duty that you stagger, and GST is applicable on commercial property, GST is exempt for residential. The entire real estate property tax included, which was restructured about 3 years ago, now property tax is a staggered system. It has become very murky. Real estate tax is no more straightforward. When I started promoting Singapore real estate overseas, I used to be able to tell oh, if you bought this property, it is worth 5 million, annual rental is worth, say, $100,000. I can estimate for you roughly your property tax is how much, net of property tax, your income tax may be how much, Mr. Wijaya from Indonesia. The numbers and the reasonable figures that you can pull, straightforward. Today I can't do it without pulling up a table and then checking against the table. And to top it off, just one simple example highlights how complex it is. If today you went to buy a HDB shophouse that is 2 stories, HDB shophouse foreigners can buy because it is commercial title. But the second story is residential. So as a foreigner, when you buy that second story, he has to pay additional buyer's stamp duty. Ground floor, if the seller is GST registered, ground floor he has to pay GST on the ground floor valuation. So a HDB shophouse in a prime location may be worth $4 million. The upstairs may be worth 800,000, downstairs worth 3.2 million. There is ABSD on the upstairs value, there is GST on the downstairs value, but you're just buying one single property. One transaction that is so complex. I mean, eventually this piece of quilt blanket that we are stitching, and we keep stitching, eventually there's some weakness somewhere, it's going to tear apart. We don't know where it will come from. But I didn't like the fact that we are trying to become more and more murky when our competitors around the world are trying to streamline themselves to become more and more transparent. Second point.
How much tax is there now? How much is it? Overall, all these taxes and all this, how much does it add up to?
I need a scientific calculator to explain to you, because it is now staggered. Of course, it favors a lot of the lower end properties in terms of property tax, for example. But it escalates up very fast if, say, you are now finally able to own Ardmore Park, $9 million, your property tax escalates quickly. My second point is about healthcare expenses. And strange to say finance minister opening the budget talking about aging population, but then when it came to healthcare expenses, let me look at his speech. He said that we more than doubled our healthcare spending from 3.9 billion in 2011, at which time the health minister was asleep, just like the housing minister was asleep. At that time, the health minister was the one who had $70 for his heart surgery. And then they more than doubled to 10.2 billion last year. I'm very happy with that. But again, that is playing catch up to your point. Why did they have to play the catch up? We can discuss later. Then he announced that we'll be having 450,000 elderly today, increasing 900,000 elderly by the year 2030. By elderly, I take him to mean 65 years old and above. So we know the numbers, 900,000 people. Out of, by that time, maybe we have 6.5 million, 6.9 million population. We can do the sums. Specifically, how much are you spending on these 900,000 people? Because he then goes on to say our expenditure on healthcare will be 2.2% today of GDP, increasing to 3% in 2030, and that would be 3%, which this increase equals to $3.9 billion. But there is zero mention of how much of this will be allocated to the above 65. What are you planning for the aging population? Zero clue. Secondly, when you're planning for healthcare services for the aging population, what sort of environment are they living in? And in the last 2 budgets, including the Committee for Future Economy, we can't see that. Services of the healthcare plus the environment that is surrounding our above 65-year-olds. I've got my theory of why this has been sidelined for a long time, but maybe we can discuss that later.
All right. But now I've been thinking this question: what is the role of a budget in developing a nation? And we know that before the budget, we have been talking about, well, Singapore is getting older. We are one of the fastest aging populations in the world, if not the first 2. So 1 in 4 will be about 65 and above by the year 2030. But at the same time, I'm also very concerned about how we are developing the young, especially the children. I see on the board dealing with the issue of early childhood. So we have a problem because we are not developing children with creative minds, with curiosity, and with compassion. So we are continuing to build a very competitive society. And I had hoped that the budget will be a more compassionate budget. But I see the current budget as very conservative. Well, it is catch up, and I do agree with Belgium. I still think that it is too conservative in the way we present the vision for Singapore. And I had a chance to talk to one very senior minister back in 2014. It was a dialogue, and we talked about the Singapore core. Because at the point of time, we had many problems. That was 3 years after the watershed election 2011, where we knew that our emphatic immigration policy has allowed so many foreigners to come in and occupying very core positions. Whether it's the head of departments in a bank or they get their own people. And this minister expressed his deep concern that we are not developing deep skills for Singaporeans. That is why you realize that the next 2-3 years we talk about the Singapore core. I think the government was trying to, to market this policy that you want to build our Singaporeans to be experts in key domains. But I don't see that happening in the budget. So we have two problems. One problem is that we're not building a society where people have hope as well as the skills and the tools to develop domain expertise in core industries. We can't be good in every industry. But at the same time, we're not spending enough to build a sense of entrepreneurial spirit in our children. We could easily actually come up with policies or even grant for schools to start getting our kids to invent things, to create new ideas, solve problems. I feel that that is not enough. And lastly, I work with charitable organizations that deal with aging. In fact, I've just published a book entitled Better Me, that was part of the Council of the Age, where we talk about how to help our older folks to retire confidently, gracefully, and with dignity. And it's a big problem right now because I also deal with the issue, my publishing program will deal with the issues of mental health. So I work with top psychiatrists in this area to talk about mental health conditions among the older folks. And it's frightening. So we have not addressed some of these core issues. And I feel that the budget is not bold enough to really address many of these social issues as well as economic issues. And I feel that we can do much better.
Okay. I think many of the issues have been covered. My perspective is that the budget covered three main areas. One was how to take advantage of emerging Asia, where a lot of the activity is going to be moving to this region, and how we placed and geared to take advantage of it. Fortunately, our location plays a major role in that score, and how do we leverage that? Secondly is emerging technologies. How do we take advantage of the new technologies, whether it be digitalization, data analytics, etc., and artificial intelligence. Those have become buzzwords, but they need to be translated into achievable realities. And the third issue that was addressed was an aging population. And that is a very real issue, and it worries me that if the population is going to hit 900,000 in 2030, and I'm one of those candidates in there, and the percentage of GNP that goes towards it, I think from 2.1 or 2.3 to 3%, is that adequate? And by developed country status, that would appear to be very low. And as he says, have the issues really been addressed? I attended a conference yesterday by KPMG on exactly this topic, the budget. And they had a live poll from the audience, which described the budget as being conservative, boring, disappointing, and the fourth one was future looking. My own view is it is very difficult to get a glamorous budget each time around. I mean, we've achieved 50 years of livelihood, and this not being an election year, it's unlikely that it's going to be a lot of giveaways. A lot of the expectations would probably be for next year. That having been said, there were still quite a number of goodies, and my initial concern was the government was losing the plot in some areas. But my own view was that Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat addressed many of the major issues going forward that we have to look into to become viable as a country. But as one speaker rightfully pointed out just now, it's the implementation that's going to be key, because the SMEs very often have not plugged themselves into the opportunities, don't know how to handle them, and are so preoccupied with operational issues of survivability and the here and now that they are not addressing the bigger picture. And the paradigm has got to shift for graduates to go into technology and set up startups, but also to marry with the SMEs. In the past, during my time, you graduated and you went straight into an MNC. That was the logical thing to do. If not one MNC, then another one. But nobody was gravitating towards the SMEs, and the SMEs didn't feel comfortable with the graduates. But during the last downturn, we displaced graduates from the business schools in SMEs and picked up 70% of their salaries for 6 months to help them be accepted. And lo and behold, the marriage worked very well. The SMEs liked their contribution and felt that it was a very valuable contribution. And the PMETs, as they were called, found a new calling and felt that they could contribute constructively as opposed to being unemployed. And many of those that we put in after the 6-month subsidy were employed by the SMEs. So we've got to look at the implementation more carefully. And I have a number of points I've taken down from the other speakers, which I'll address as we go along. But I'll just take the one on education, which you mentioned. And interestingly, I work a lot with the Scandinavian countries, and the Ministry of Education, including the Minister of Education from Finland, was here recently, and she said that both Singapore and Finland have similar populations of 5 million plus. We both value education very highly to make us relevant to the world, and both countries have been rated in educational terms among the top 2 in the world. But herein is the major difference. In Singapore, policy is centered down from the MOE, from the NIE, and so on. And till date, they've done a good job. The difference in Scandinavia is that it's decentralized, and the schools make a lot of decisions. And so they do make mistakes, but then they try and get it right as well. And every school in Scandinavia is deemed to be a good school. I don't have to move home. I don't have to dig up my old status as an alumni and try and fix a position for my child. Each school is developed as a good school. But very interestingly, in Scandinavia, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, there are incidents of producing unicorns. These are companies that do over $1 billion in turnover. Your Skypes, your Spotifys, and so on, have come there, and their incidence is far higher than in, say, Silicon Valley or out here. And in Finland, for instance, they do not believe in burdening the children with homework. And there's a strong balance between schoolwork and leisure and sports. And I think sports plays an incredible role in making you an entrepreneur or someone willing to get into technology and start something and take the risk, because you learn how to take risk in sports. Now, you take both those countries, they lead the world in golf, in tennis, in swimming, in athletics, motor racing, rallying, skiing and so on. When you downhill ski at high speed or you're doing rallying, you push the limits and you know how far you can go. And when you do fall down, you learn how to pick yourself up and go again. That, I think, is missing in our context. And our kids seem to be drained at the end of the day through the schooling process. And in a closed-door session which we had with the Minister of Education in Singapore, he actually was candid enough to say that we have become experts at sitting for examinations, not necessarily benefiting from the syllabus or being able to use it down the road, but we just spend all our time trying to ace examinations, presumably to please our parents, and that's what we don't want. So it's fortunate that they're beginning to realize the issues and things are going to change, hopefully. But these are some of the factors that have to be looked into at the ground level. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah.
I'd like to add on to those two comments that you brought up before I speak about the budget itself. The first is about sports. I think one of the things that we can do better. Now, I played rugby since I was 13 and until university. There wasn't 1 second in my mother's or my father's life that they could come and watch me play, because it has to be a family engagement. And if you don't get family involved, it will be what it is in Singapore. If you have sports in school that is on Wednesday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, you can forget about family participation. It has to be weekends, it has to be evenings. And if you do this as a country, we can get to where you hope sports can be in Singapore. And for the longest time, I wish somebody in that position could do something about it. The other is about education. I'll just pose this question. Are our schools institutes for learning or institutes for validation, where we send our children to be validated? And that's really the question to be posed. Are they really institutes for learning or institutes for validation? So I'm not pro-budget, I can tell you that, or rather am I extremely negative about it. But I will speak about 2 points that I think were not touched. The first, a little bit in my element, which is the carbon tax. I see that as a positive because it's hitting industry where it's really hurting the environment, spot on. And for that, I applaud the government, although they've got a lot of flack. I think they stood their ground. What's to be seen is when they start to collect 250 million a year, what will they do with that money? If they can take that money and drive the correct initiatives to start a carbon economy. And the carbon economy, if we done well, can be a fifth gear to fiscal policy, because you can start whole spending all over again. So I hope they do that well. The other is about the social welfare space. The last part about the good part and the last part in that speech about social welfare was that they're encouraging volunteerism, which is good because then they're trying to engage public, harness the collective kindness, or if you will, of Singaporeans to give back. And I don't know exactly how it's going to roll out, but I see that as a positive step. That's all the comments I have.
Okay. So we've got a wide array of points of view, which is good. I think then the budget gives you a lot of talking points. One of the things was how will it affect people on the ground? I mean, do you think a lot of these are just sort of big picture things which have been said? And as mentioned, some of it has to do with the implementation. How is it going to be rolled out? How is it going to affect people? So can people look forward to things being better, smoother, or is there still a lot of uncertainty about what this budget means to you on the ground?
I can tell you one thing. I have 3 working adult kids, and they don't care. They are not impressed.
Are they generally apathetic towards all these policy statements that are coming out at a budget, or are they just not bothered about what has been said about this budget?
No, yeah, it doesn't impact them in any way, at all. And they are all in the 20s and 30s. And this is our engine for tomorrow. Why are we not doing something that impacts? So we have two strata field, right? Actually, we have three big parts. One is the retiree, which is the social side, which we have to look into it, and it would be a political nightmare if they don't. But then the engine for growth is the current 20s to 30s. And that we got to stimulate their desire to put their career at risk, come out and do something unique, try something to collaborative together. There's nothing there of it. And of course, the younger group, which is those in school today, we have preached the word that we want to be innovative in education. It takes a generation to change mindset over the next 20 years. So we can't change it now. Our population has decreased, the number of schools has reduced. It begets us to make schools very unique. But our schools run the same old way. So if they start from the kindergarten, where our kids are now trained to be innovative or encouraged to be innovative instead of loading up with work, they've reduced exams. But look, parents still think exam and getting grade is the passport to success in life. And it's no longer true. By the time they come out, this generation, which are below 10, come out, 3 out of 4 of their cohort, if they go at this trend, will have a degree. So what is the uniqueness of having a degree? Our generation is important because you are the minority, you're 6% out of 100%, but no longer there. So, but still the trend is we go towards getting a degree, getting from a good university, and that is endorsement that you're successful in life.
Isn't there a general disconnect in some of these things? So, you may want certain things, you want to have innovative thinking and all, but who's going to implement that? Are the people implementing it innovative enough to develop innovative methods of training?
No, so it starts from having an environment that encourages you to have this free spirited in your mindset. So yes, I think sports is a great way to know how to fall and pick up yourself up, and we don't do enough now. We send all our kids to what? Ballet class, piano class, music class, all this in a high society thing that doesn't cause us to fail and fall.
But even in sports, right, in schools, they don't go for all sports across the board. They only go for things that they are guaranteed of success.
Of course.
If not, then you fall through. It's knocked off the
pedestal.
Yeah.
In our time, we have interclass, right? You play. Even you play rugby, you play for your class, and you have a chance to play. Now you don't play for school. You're no longer in the game.
It's elitism that's kicked into that area.
No, because the schools are measured by the fact that we have won.
It's the KPI of the
school.
And I think the KPIs are wrong. Because they're emphasizing the wrong aspect of it, not sportsmanship, not participation, not developing your skills, but where can the school be placed in the scheme of things. Like him, I also played rugby from the age of 13, played soccer as well up to university level, and enjoyed it, learned a lot of my lessons in life in that. But the schools are not encouraging sports fully. They do encourage it to some extent, but it's not part of our national ethos, and we don't have that as a following like they do in Australia or in Scandinavia or in many other countries. And I think that adds to your all-round personality. And the other aspect it does is that it opens you up, allows you to be articulate and to be able to hold your own in discussions, which many of the expatriates here do very well. Why should that be the case? I think we don't lack content, and what I find also sad is that, like the discussion today, 9 out of 10 times when I go out for a dinner with friends and so on, you can have a highly enlightened discussion with people in the know and who know what the issues are. But for the longest time, the powers that we had blinkers as to who fitted in, especially of Singaporeans, of their paradigm. And there was so much talent that is being overlooked, and these poor chaps in their 40s and 50s, like someone mentioned, having psychological problems and so on. There's so much talent that's been overlooked, and these very same guys have housing loans to pay, have children to educate, and someone comes from out of town, they listen to them. And that I find sad. I think we have to reharness the talent that's here, and it's a fantastic talent base. I always cite the example of Tan Chin Kiong, who set up SMU. Okay, he would have died part of the woodwork in NUS. He was my professor in marketing. I studied under him. He was a fantastic chap. But he was given this opportunity, and he was a local, and he did what he did. And there's so much other talent like that, and I think we are bypassing it, and that's sad because we are overlooking it.
Maybe, sorry. I was just saying, maybe with the talent, people should stop looking towards getting instruction and just start doing what they feel they want to do. And if it fits in, it fits in. If it doesn't, it's a gamble, it's a risk. You fall, you get
That
up
is
and try again.
a good point, because we were great implementers of policy from America, Europe, and Japan, best practice. And our strength was we were great at implementation, few people had vision, and two, in Singapore's context, unlike most countries in Asia, if $100 was budgeted for a project, $100 went for the project. So we were very good at that. But today you're a mature economy, supposedly developed, and you are in the forefront with all the other developed countries. And to that extent, you have to start doing new innovative things and create your own best practice. And by definition, if you are at cutting edge, you will get things wrong. So you must empower the people in the civil service who are doing this, the right to make mistakes, the right to be wrong. Currently, you penalize them for getting it wrong. You do not reward them for getting it right. So what is the behavior pattern going to be, right? And that's a price we're going to pay. And I do not see the Nyam Tong Daos, the Go Keng Swees, and the Philip Yos blossoming right now. I think we have regressed on that score, and that's a concern for me, because how do you put yourself on the map?
Our civil servant, I think our political leaders feel the ground because they have to face the electorate every 4 or 5 years, and so they know the issues, and I think they're capable of thinking beyond. However, I think the gap right now, which is the civil servant, I think that become a laggard now that affects it. The efficiency of our civil servant is affecting us, and therefore there's a gap in implementation. Our civil servant followed this whole system where you came from the same school, you progress the same way, and this permanent secretary role that you hold that role and you hold for 10 years. Now, who in the world want to follow up in the 10 years? They will do nothing that will raise the rise world, because post 10 years, you will determine whether you're a chairman of a big step or a chairman of a small little one or nothing. So nobody want to follow up, because it's a system of beneficial for their future, right? So they don't take the risk. So I think if the government wants to really see a change in implementation and our civil servant feeling the ground, because they hear it, from the civil servant is one field where they know what's happening on the ground. I think our scholars, that we have a lot of scholars in various areas, during their tenureship as scholars, they should be sent to the private sector or in the social environment.
Absolutely.
And that becomes a tick. It says, all right, you have done that tour. You understand what's happening on the ground before you hold on a higher level role. They're all professional civil servants. And as a result, they have no fear at all. And they do the same thing. Because we're involved in certain kind of work that has involved the civil servant, they always look at the political master and says, what is your view? Before they do anything.
Yeah. And
if not,
and they're very comfortably off as well
of
in
course,
those positions, right?
Of course. So I think we need to do more and get them to take, if the risk doesn't come from there, the implementation of all our policy from schools to the work environment to the charitable environment will all be affected, because this level has not been exposed.
Algie, you want
I think this budget is a microcosm of what's happening in Singapore. Let me put it first very simply, then let me try and explain what do I mean. I think there is, and Kanan will be surprised to know that, to hear me now say, I'm not taking a position pro-government now. No, what do I mean by that? I think the government knows, right, the major problem that we have. But they are not prepared for various reasons. One could be election, but many other reasons. They are not prepared to disrupt. They have to. This is not just disruptive technology, but I really think you have to disrupt society. Okay, let me go further. We have a population that have been brought up in a way, which is spoon-fed. Don't talk bad about the government. We know what is right. So, can you imagine a population that has been brought up that way? Now they are in their 50s and 60s. They have been trained for a certain skill set, which is of no use today. Now at 55, you want them to relearn. What do they relearn? I'm now 70. It's handling my laptop is already becoming difficult, and even my mobile phone, because my fingers are not more frigid now than it used to be before. And if I go to my children, so as they teach me, they have got no patience, and I get angry. So anyway, I met a friend of mine who is 85 years old. He said he went for his future skills program, pick up cooking. He was very happy. So I picked up skill. Now I can make biryani. You come to my house. But he told me, "Can you help me to get a hawker license?" Right? So I'm meeting him tomorrow. I'm going knowing that I will not be able to help him for various reasons. I think one is age, and he wants a hawker center. He wants a hawker license to operate in his area, which is Boon Keng. So anyway, I'll go and try. I go through the process with him. So you have a situation where I think, and I'm talking about the people who are in their 40s, 50s, right? Government is not prepared to come out and say, we have raised our retirement age. Maybe we should say we have no retirement age. Why are they not prepared to do that? For fear of reaction from the businessmen. So they have to be supportive of the business, because Singapore is a business center, right? So this budget, which is, as I said, is a microcosm of the whole Singapore, is squeezed between these two. They know they have to do certain things, right? I mean, take the education. We spoke quite a bit about education. If you look at both the education minister's speeches, they are talking about all the things that we have been talking about. But their problem, I think, this is my assessment, their problem is the teachers down the line. Yeah. The teachers down the line don't know how to teach for the new world, because they have been trained in a different way, right? Now, how do you go there and disrupt the teaching profession? Is that possible? I'm not sure, right?
Sorry. Before even blaming the teachers, we have to blame the KPI. So I'm a part-timer with Ngee Ann Polytechnic, module leader as well. I'm part-timing in NUS. The KPIs simply don't allow because you are supposed to do this. You have to file your claims, you have to file your paperwork like this. That system has been set in place. So even Minister in his discussion admitted that we are good exam takers. But does the minister dare to change the KPI away from the exam?
Okay, I think good intervention. I think extremely good point. But I maintain that the teachers, if they are told, right, this is the outcome we want, right? This is the outcome. That means people who can think on their own, they can think on their feet, right? You think our teachers, the way they are trained, can do that? So I think we are getting ourselves, and I come to the final point that I want to make. So we need bold leadership. We really need bold leadership, not just in politics, but at different levels.
Sure.
Sorry, I talk about old again. Since it's my favorite topic. Are we using our older people well? People who have left their professions, right? I think the only place that is using the older people is the government, the civils. If you go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website and you look at the number of ambassadors at large, right? There are many, and these are good people, from Channing Chi to Bilahari Kausikan to Tomiko and many others. They are so useful when you are dealing with the outside world. But what about the others? What about in the private sector? Why is it that, firstly, is it the attitude? Why are they not using them? But why is it things are not done to show the value of the old people? They may not be so fit, and I honestly think it is not that they are asking for the same salaries.
I think there
Pay
is
them
this
an
wage credit given to the older employees.
Yes.
Yeah, so the government is actually doing something.
No, I'm
Yeah.
what is the government doing?
To
this
supplement the salary
credit? Yeah.
of the older
Workers.
employees who are going to be paid less by the employer.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
that-
it's some kind of a
okay.
top up, you see.
Very good.
Yeah.
I think I'm sure the government is doing that.
Yeah.
But I would like empirical evidence to show that the employees are keeping these people before you jump in. Let me see. I mean, my favorite example is SPH. Right? Once you reach 62, then you are on a yearly contract, which means they cut your salary by 10 or 20%, right? And then it keeps on going. So why can't the SPH, which is such a cash-rich company, use government wage credit to keep these people at the same salaries? So I think when you look at individual experiences, you're absolutely right. I think the government intention is there. They really know the problem, but I think they can't find a solution of the
I
problem.
think part of the answer is what you said. You need bold leadership,
Yeah.
and that leadership to be empowered, and the fact that they may make mistakes. I never forget, as a young graduate, I was having dinner with two of the brothers who own Tetra Pak. Until today, it's a privately owned company, and they are vulgarly profitable.
like
They've
that
done
word.
so well around the world, China, India, you name it, South Africa, and America, and so on, because of the revolution in packaging of packets, right? And he said, if your managing director is busy, sack him. And I just graduated, so I didn't know too much of the business world. And I had this quizzical look on my face, and he said, you look troubled. I said, I am. And he said, I'll explain, he said, the managing director is going to run out of fingers to plug the holes in the dike. His job is put his hand on the pulse of the business and know what's happening. And his bigger job is to chart, not be operationally busy, but to chart where the business is going 5, 10, and 15 years down the road. And that should be the role of our leaders in private industry, in government. How do we keep ourselves relevant? And another point I add to that is that when you say discussion and broadness of mind and debate, to start with, we should liberalize the press. There's only one Singapore Pravda. How the hell do you have a liberal-minded society? And then when you debate policies, you do not make violent U-turns, because when they are implemented, they have been debated thoroughly and they have been discussed thoroughly and they've been shot at. And if you can still justify it, then it deserves to go ahead. And the people who bring up points that make them the devil's advocate, as it were, first and foremost, it should not be personal. It should be on the issue. And we must learn to debate issues and not have it personal. Secondly, you do not become any less a Singaporean if you are against policy, because you do it with honesty and integrity, with the interest of Singapore at heart. And that distinction has to come across.
Yeah, just to complete the point I was trying to make about the government knows the problems, but they don't know how to go about doing it because of various factors. Take two companies, look at Comfort Delgro. Right? Comfort Delgro did not know the Uber was going to come in. Comfort Delgro did not know that Grab was going to come in. What did Comfort Delgro do? Practically nothing, right? And what happened in the end? Share price plunged, right? Thousands of taxis are lying idle. Why? Because they were in such a comfortable monopolistic situation. That's yeah, right. I didn't think of that actually.
What did you say?
Comfort.
Comfort and comfortability.
Okay.
Then the second one is SPH, right?
Yeah.
It's such a comfortable situation. A $1 billion company, very comfortable, protected by government rules and regulations. Now, major upheaval is coming up, and they don't know how to handle it.
Certainly.
So that I think is there's a lot of these things that we have had a very, very comfortable life, and somehow we have missed the opportunity.
So while you say that the government has recognized it and keep hammering this point about skills future, retool, please reskill, did they really make any decisions recently that shows that they understood the disruption? Why put a star general as CEO who didn't perform previously? Secondly, then allow this star general to pull in an ex-Air Force colonel as the CFO of a company with a few billion market cap. What would military people know about?
Before that, I'll just add that after he left NOL and he sold it, the French guy who took over within 6 months turned around a profit.
Yes.
And that is very telling. These are our national assets. And someone, I think Richard alluded to it, but keeping costs in line, right? We always think that we have to increase price, but there has been a lot of wastage, unnecessarily, maybe unintentional. But we've been a rich country, and there's no expense spared where budgets are concerned for many of the government entities and other issues and other entities. And I think we can be a lot more frugal. And for one thing, companies can be flatter. Yeah. You look at Scandinavia, the employees are highly empowered. You're given the right to make decisions. If you make bad decisions, out you go, eventually.
The one-star general flattened SPH by getting rid of content producers instead of flattening administration and overheads.
And then they came to work and found they could not access their computers. And to me, that's the first lesson that no management should do to anybody. But to do it to journalists who've got the power of the word, I think is committing suicide.
I think we become a nation for the last 50 years. The success came from a managed control environment. In other words, we manage it efficiently and therefore we'll be successful. But given the disruptive world today, we must embrace an environment where success can be achieved without control. And it's very hard for them to allow everybody to flourish and yet have success. So, for example, we talk about Grab, right? Now, when Grab started, you know who founded Grab, right? It's the grandson. Yeah, Malaysian, Tan Chong, the grandson of Tan Chong Motor. And he built a company that's larger than his grandfather built in his whole life. He did it in less than 10 years. Now, did he know, and did Anthony Tan know that what he built in Grab when he started is going to be what he is today? He has no idea.
I doubt it.
He has no idea. He just started something that thought that had a need, that would be disruptive, and he just went on. And then it meanders and changed. Okay. Now, but I tell credit to our Singapore side. Temasek invested in Grab, okay, when they were very small. And so there's a Temasek, Vertex. I know them because my company also got invested by Vertex as well, so we knew about the Grab story. So I'm glad that they now put some seed capital to invest in Singapore companies that will have this disruptive capability. But it has to be outside the body. It cannot be in the main body that we do. Now, I made a comment earlier that intelligence got nothing to do with having a degree. I would say nothing. I mean, the correlation is not direct. So there's this concept called My Story MD, which I'm going to invest in this US company. And this guy has no degree at all, okay, in the world. But he's appeared in opera, around the world, and is known. He's invited to speak to the president and so forth. And he launched this new company. And he's the first guy who created this concept where he can actually film the sperm all the way to fertilization with the baby, the whole thing on National Geographic. And he's now going to scan your whole body, and you can see all your healthcare on your phone in control. Now, when he did this concept, does he know where the application? It is going to be huge. He doesn't know the whole social impact, not just between a doctor and a patient, the portability of us, having it. But he launched it. And, this guy is a professor at Yale. Now, he has no degree, not even a bachelor's degree. He's a professor, adjunct professor at Yale. And so, My Story MD.
My Story.
Okay. And so, I think we look at this, and therefore, I think we free our society out from this environment to not have this restriction that we have to go a certain path. The path, everything is disrupted. Education is disrupted. And we have to disrupt education. We already see all the disruption of the social network that's affecting us. We don't change our education, our next group of children is going to fall into the same hole that the current working adults are falling into now.
We're too much of a sure thing society, right?
Yeah.
We only do things if it's a
Success
sure
without
thing.
control.
Yeah.
But those success stories, I'm playing devil's advocate here. How many of those are flukes? For every one, how many fell by the wayside?
Oh, of course, the ratio is always very small, very small,
So
very small.
I think the press especially has to take up the responsibility to curate some of these stories very carefully. I used to see in the past celebration of young men, 28, banker, questions posed in Straits Times, questions posed, what was your best investment? What's your this and what's your that? What's your car that you bought? So when you put and you frame people like that up in the national newspaper, you send a signal that if you're not 28 and a millionaire, you're a failure. And that kind of thing. And so when we try to reinforce some of these stories too much, we run the danger of making things actually worse, because people will then fall in love with some of these stories and they quit school, for example. Imagine how the whole Singapore just quit school. It's that kind of danger that I'm talking about that we need to balance. So how many of these are flukes?
I think the biggest disservice that's being done for the younger generation is by the parents who don't understand the paradigm shifts. They want them to work hard, do exercises and homework and so on. And that is not going to produce the answers. And you have to find a balance.
Sure.
Get your degree if you have to, but also have this entrepreneurial streak. And like you said, the failure rate is high. In venture capital, out of 10 investments, 8 or 9 will go south. The 1 or 2 that make it will make the difference. And on the other score, I think I'll give them credit where, for the first time, Singapore is making it very conducive for blockchain and fintech to progress. In fact, Hong Kong is kind of concerned that they are very much behind the curve and no one is doing it there. And the likes of Bitcoin would not have seen the light of day 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And they know that this could be a potential lemon, it could even be an embarrassment. But they also know that somewhere in that cohort they're going to be winners. And they want to be there early. And to understand how finance is going to be disrupted through these technologies. And it's a very different role that the MAS has taken from before saying practically no to anything that is unknown or
But they have taken a step back.
Yeah.
They have taken a step back.
Not,
Yes, so my friend who has started up his cryptocurrency and then after 2 years of IT engineering work, finally ready to launch, they were featured on Business Times cover page last year, August. A week later, MAS came up to say, since it is a cryptocurrency, it is issued against real estate as an asset, we consider this a derivative. It becomes a security. Please get yourself a securities license. So, because I think maybe FACTA, the Financial Action Task Force Singapore is going to be audited this year or next year, MAS is actually pulling the brakes.
Yeah.
And
there
so
may be
people are thinking
exigencies
about
that call it,
moving out to Australia
Yeah.
or even to Japan where there are cryptocurrency exchanges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about education, I think you rightly mentioned about the home. We have this tendency to blame the schools all the time, but I think half the responsibility has to be taken by the parents. I'll give you a very, very personal example. My grandson, who is now 9 years old, he was in Rosyth, Primary 1, Primary 2, and part of Primary 3. The parents began to realize that there is a major, major problem with him in school. Not discipline problem, but this guy, I describe him as a fearless chap, as a restless chap, and he is a disruptor. Okay? So they realize he cannot function, he will never function in school, in our Singapore school. And I remember asking him a few months ago, I found out that he had this major problem with the English teacher in his school. So I said, So dealing with him, I have to ask very, very direct questions. He said, "You don't like Miss Ko?" He said, "I don't like." So I said, "Okay, why don't you like? What is wrong with her?" He said, "She would scream in class when we boys make some noise. And she would just walk out of the class." Then after I said, "But why didn't you all go? Maybe you should talk to her." He said, "Yeah, I spoke to her." I said, "What did you tell her?" I told her that she should go for meditation class. She said, and my grandson said, "My grandma goes for a meditation class and she's very calm now." Right? Anyway, they took him out. They put him in an international school at heavy cost, really heavy cost. But they know that this is what I have to do. And I tell you, I see a new boy. It is just impossible. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. This boy has become so much more confident. Like the way he talks, his language in just 3 months, his language has improved tremendously.
He's motivated.
He's just not motivated. And where do they do? How do they do their homework? It's either via video, laptop, no writing, and it's just an incredible situation. So what is happening in an international school? Maybe they're not preparing the student for typical exam. Maybe they're giving that student a world view. I don't know what is happening. But what to me the most striking feature is become so confident. And confidence is very important in the new world. I think
There are always pros and cons in every education system.
everything, Casey, everything has got pros and cons, right? But what do I look at? I look at the pros, right? I just look at the transformation of this 9-year-old boy.
Yeah, you have to understand that to be able to send somebody to an international school,
You need the money.
the person has to be economically
But I can tell you that
well off.
my daughter, no. My daughter and her husband have made a tremendous sacrifice. They could have used that money for many other things.
Yes, that's right.
And now they are. I haven't asked them about the budget, but I think they are somewhat struggling. But they have decided this is what I have to do for my child.
Why can't
That's
Singapore
one thing,
schools change
which
their
I-
teaching method? Exactly.
Is it a
To make
IB
it
Who
program,
can teach like that?
That's one thing which I
They don't know. They don't
Sorry,
know.
KPI.
Is it an IB program?
I
International
think so.
baccalaureate?
I think so. I don't
International-
know. I
IB
didn't.
is different.
I don't go
IB,
and meddle with the
I think
daughter's family.
we're running short on
Okay,
time now.
sorry.
So just as a last kind of recap, not so much a recap, but just to get a sense of what you guys feel about what would you like to see discussed at the next budget?
Discuss.
What
I
would you
think
like to-
there is this
the next
point
budget,
of
what would you like to see
income inequality, which I think the government has not addressed very well in this budget.
Actually, you're right.
Economically, our country is more or less divided into three strata. The upper 20% upper class, the 60% middle class, and 20% lower class. Social mobility is something which the government of the old days has promised the population. But in this budget, the increase in stamp duty, and again I'm revisiting stamp duty, the ABSD, they are actually hindering social mobility. The 60% of the middle class population will have difficulty in trying to get to the upper 20% because of the ABSD, and also now the additional 1%.
Why do you measure social mobility by the size and the value of somebody's residential property?
Not economically, we have what other measures have we got?
Sorry, why don't you measure people in terms of happiness?
That is too abstract. When you have no money, how to be happy in Singapore?
Why do you have money by upgrading? When you upgrade, you are taking a higher value loan.
Mortgage loan.
Yeah, why don't you have a lot
like
of cash and rent a property?
Yeah, further to what you say, it's
Oh my
like
God.
the point he made.
Sorry, man, Casey.
Yeah, that he made that success at 28 and that kind of thing. I think as a nation we have had to have
value systems.
Yes, absolutely.
And success is just not the dollar value. And when that is made the goal, many of them are going to become croppers and become, psychological cases as well. And that is a worry going forward because there are no escape valves. No? Because we are a city-state, and I often give the example that you are like on a treadmill. You have to run to stand still. There are no shortcuts on that score. And so that has to come across. And I think the industry that I was involved in, like mooncakes, the guys, I went to visit the factories in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and the guys doing mooncakes and other confectionery, they were proud to be chefs or in charge of the factory. That was their vocation. Or a guy who is a golfing coach in Australia, he's proud. He's not looking left and right to move up and increase his social mobility. That's his calling in life. He says, I make enough money with this, and they're proud of it. Singapore, the problem we had with our factory guys is that they kept moving out, and they didn't take professional pride. And I had a problem with molding. So, and the guys in Hong Kong, and I'm a competitor, they had enough professional integrity to tell me where the possible potential problems were and how to overcome it. And that's something else we must inculcate, that you don't have to be valued in terms of a dollar value. And that, I think, will add to much more happiness and stability. And many a country in Southeast Asia doesn't, and per capita wise, is a fraction of ours, but the people as a whole are a lot happier.
Can I come back to your question? I'm trying to answer that question. So I think that's a very relevant question. What do we expect for the next budget, right? What I didn't see in this budget is what I would like to see in the next budget. That's the simplest way of saying it. I think this budget lacks really a futuristic scenario for me as a Singaporean. I don't know which way we are headed. And I would like to see that in more concrete terms. I think we discussed that to some extent here. So something that is much more concrete that will say, okay, the next 5 years, this is the kind of Singapore we want, that we want to achieve. I didn't see that in the budget this time around. Second one is, I think Singapore should start having a really honest to goodness discussion on reserves. Right? And it's a difficult, it'll be a difficult discussion because it's like in a family, right? You have a lot of savings. And then one member of the family falls sick. How much of money do you take out to help this member of the family? How much do you leave behind? I mean, that's a very, very difficult, it's an emotional. So I think we really need a discussion on reserves, a discussion on NIRC, the interest.
Yes.
Why 50%? And then when somebody suggested why 50, why not more than 50%, the government's response, we cannot take 100%. Well, whoever said take 100%? Why can't it be 55%? Why can't it be 60%? So I think we really need an honest discussion on reserves as we move forward, because this is going to be a big issue moving forward.
On that score, Ho Kwong Ping at a recent seminar at SMU also said, we have not discussed many of these issues as a nation. We've not had national dialogue. We need to have a national dialogue.
We hardly ever have a national dialogue.
And he gave the example of Japan. They decided not to let foreigners in because they want to keep it Japanese. But they've accepted as a nation lower growth and that the corporates will have to invest overseas.
That's fine.
Yeah, and if you've decided then you've made a call and you've decided this is what you want to do. But we are floundering and we have not had these discussions.
This discussion should not be chaired by a minister.
No.
Three thoughts. Number one, I think what I like to see in the next budget is essentially an incentive plan to encourage our SMEs to collaborate when they go external. Our economy growth cannot be from Singapore; it's too small. And within our neighbor, within ASEAN, itself, is going to be the top 5 largest economy in the world in that grouping itself. And we don't provide enough incentive for them to collaborate. They can't go alone. They will fail, but they have to go collectively, like the Chaebol system, to go out. And we don't have that incentive to say, let's collaborate. I like to see that. Number 2, I think we have to define success. Success is like the stars in the skies. And it's not defined by, jobs in a corporate. If not, we'll be like the last 50 years, we've been great as a nation of employees, you know. But the next 50 years, we're going to be a nation of employees or civil servant. So now it's cool because you're a civil servant, you're safe. Everything is well protected. You are steady. But I think we should encourage people to be chefs, to try new things, to be innovative in their own way. They become the expert in a small field but go deep. And we don't have enough of that encouragement. And third, I think we should have a failure grant. Okay. In other words, if somebody innovates something and launch a company, and maybe, you know, if with the track record they have, they launch it and they hire people and they fail, we should give them a recovery. You know, instead of giving them a grant to launch, if you try something within a certain parameter and you fail, we give you a grant to tide you through until your next idea. So that's the third idea.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, I feel that while it is important for our government to be responsible and prudent in the way we spend money, I think at this point of time, I'm afraid that we do have a mindset of poverty that we're not able to spend because of the future. I always believe that when you are strong financially, and I was just reading a report that our reserves is likely to be past $1 trillion.
Yep.
We should use part of the money to really catalyze the next stage for Singapore. I mean, I had hoped very much when we were celebrating our 2015, or when 50th year of nation building, that our leadership can actually cast a vision for what Singapore can be in the next 50 years, but I don't think we did that. Second will be that I hope that the government can do a lot more to reduce the debt burden of our young people. I always believe that when couples or individuals are laden with debts, they cannot possibly be innovative because their whole mind will be occupied to earn money to pay the mortgage.
Which is 30 years.
Which is 30 years. I feel it for them because, I mean, I had a chance to buy my public housing at much lower price. And I look at the young couples today, when they told me, well, if it's a good location, it's 500,000+, I got a shock. Can you imagine how much they have to give away their life space for a physical space? And it affects our fertility rate, for sure. And lastly, I am hoping that the government do a lot more for Singaporeans in the 40s, 50s, and 60s on retirement adequacy. I'm not even talking about luxury lifestyle, but at least they know they can retire adequately, that they can retire, you know, with dignity. So this will be my hope for the next budget.
All right, I think we're out of time now. So thank you for everybody for the various inputs. I think there's a lot to take away and digest. Well, we'll put this up. Let's see if we get any reaction. But it'd be great if you could carry on some of these discussions. If you have thoughts that come to mind, once it's up, just carry on putting the comments in. Or if you feel there's other separate stories that you think are worth looking at, just let me know. I'm more than happy to develop whatever we can. Yeah. But thanks again.
Thank
Time,
you.
Thank you for organizing.
thinking through all this and giving us all these wonderful ideas. Thank you so
for
much.
bringing us together.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Calling us to stir up a storm, is it?
Always.